I'm sitting here around with Emma and Laura of the Femme Mafia. Hey, hello.
Hello.
Maybe first the question, what is the Femme Mafia?
Laura's just nudged me. Well, Berlin is sadly famous all over the globe for being a very femme-unfriendly city. So the Femme Mafia was formed, we formed it in November 2009 to create a space for femmes that was sort of supportive and valuing, and also to try and think up some creative strategies to tackle the sort of visibility and sexism we were experiencing in the queer community. And people had so much to say about their experiences and a lot of stories to tell about unpleasant things that happened to them on the queer scene, like being asked to leave queer spaces and going back in the closet because they found it so overwhelming, the hostility of the queer community so overwhelming that they just went back in the closet for another 5 years or something. So one of the projects we did when the group first started is that we did the Femme Show, which was in March 2010. Yeah, March 2010. And that was, it was a sort of a big femme visibility exercise, and also just wanting to showcase femmes and their talents and draw attention to ourselves in a positive way. And that got a good response. Since then we've worked on sort of little things, and our latest project is a zine that we're putting together about feminine queers' experience of sexism in the queer community. So maybe Laura wants to say more about that.
Yeah, well, for me it's a really personal project. It comes from discussions that I had when I moved to Berlin, and some of the first discussions I had about queer community in Berlin were people saying to me, don't expect to get laid, like don't expect to have sex, don't expect to feel welcomed here as a femme. Like it was really quite a negative first introduction to the queer community here in Berlin, and having talked to other femmes about experiences, like Emma said, incidents of sexism that's happened about them, I wanted to create a space for people to tell their stories and to start a discussion about sexism against femininity in the queer community, which I think is really endemic in Berlin, and it's also something that's not talked about at all. So just to start that conversation, I think is really important.
I think also because in Berlin there's a lot of emphasis in the queer community about deconstructing gender and gender politics, and it's just like people just haven't taken it to that next step of thinking about how they relate to femininity and the sort of internalised sexism they have within themselves comes to feminine people. And that's frustrating for me because I just think they're not thinking enough. There's still a lot more deconstruction that needs to be done. I think they stopped just when it started getting a bit more complicated.
Do you think that there's an exclusion of feminities in the queer scene?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. For me, I find it interesting when you walk into a queer space, and the kind of queer community I move in is female-bodied people who are assigned female at birth, so it includes dykes and queer women and trans men, and I find it strange for me that everyone really looks the same, that there is like this specific Berlin queer uniform which involves wearing a black hoodie. I feel that if there were not sexism against femininity in the queer community here, then I feel like naturally that there would be a much larger, like a wider range of gender expression. And as a feminine person, I often feel that made to feel unwelcome or felt to feel like completely unsexy, like people don't really like hit on feminine people here, whereas in other countries I lived in, like I get a lot more attention, and I think that's kind of strange. And I think there's this feeling that in order to be a good queer, you need to somehow be genderqueer, and people's interpretation of genderqueer is usually some kind of masculine trait, and femininity has been completely forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to wear black hoodies, that's fine. Like,
yeah.
we're not here to like criticise other people's fashion sense, but variety doesn't hurt at the same time. And I think it is a pity because there is such a sort of that when you turn up wearing something different, you're immediately going to get stared at.
With the exclusion and inclusion, do you think there's differences between trans persons and other persons, cis persons?
I think because masculinity is really valued in the queer community, and as it should be. I mean, I love queer masculinity, not the only way of being queer, but I think that masculinity is pretty much the top of queer hierarchy. I think that trans men are, I'm not sure, I think you might disagree with me, but I feel like trans men are quite welcome in the queer community I move in, and quite celebrated, which is awesome. But I also find it strange that there are very few trans women to be seen around.
We want a trans women of Berlin calendar as
Yeah,
well.
we want trans femininities as well as trans masculinities.
Yeah.
And I think that's strange, that I think that naturally if people were free to express themselves, there would be more trans women included in the queer community. And the translation of FLT, brown, lesbian, trans, that I feel that happens in reality in space is actually mostly just the trans means trans men more than trans women.
I have to say something there.
You may disagree.
I think that it's also a problem with that masculinity in trans women is valued very differently from masculinity in every other queer person. That like if a trans woman has something masculine, it's really like everybody's going on, you're showing masculinity, and if trans men do it, it's like great, and trans women does it, it's valued like it's as if the person is sexist or whatever, and it's as if she's a man doing something sexist or whatever. And that's the thing I think that are one of the most important things why so many trans women are not feeling comfortable in the lesbian, trans, queer scene.
And I think it shows us a very limited idea of what femininity is, and it's as if people are putting a limited idea of what a woman is as well. Like, to be a trans woman, you have to act in this way, and if you act in this way, then you're jeopardizing your identity or something. And I mean, I think this is part of the negativity that people have attached to femmes and femininity and feminine, of seeing feminine as a very limited thing and a very, kind of smaller thing. And I mean, I have people saying to me, like, but don't you ever want to do this? Like, don't you ever want to go and chop wood? Or don't you ever want to...
You can chop wood.
I'd be femme, but, what about when I ride my bike or something? You can do anything and still be femme. There's no... Behaviours aren't, like, allocated into the... And it's just surprising that you have to have those sort of conversations. And these are with people that genderqueer and consider themselves to have deconstructed gender. And
I think kind of understand in theory where this sort of shying away from femininity, where this misunderstanding of femininity comes from, because like someone who is female and identifies as a woman, I was raised, as a woman quite traditionally, and all the things that I've been told to do as a woman, like to sit a certain way, to not speak so loud, to not eat so much, like all these things, like I understand why people find the mainstream ideas about femininity oppressive, because being told how to behave as a woman is really oppressive, and to be forced into femininity, into a certain feminine role, is oppressive. Like saying as a woman you're not allowed to be feminine, you're not allowed to wear a dress, you have to wear trousers. It's telling women how to behave and what to do in exactly the same way. And I think that people don't really realise that. I mean, I don't think this is necessarily intentional.
Yeah, Leslie Feinberg said androgyny is a very liberating concept if you're androgynous. It means that it's only liberating if you are an androgynous person. If you're not, then it's constricting.
Being allowed to be what gender they want to be.
And have it valued in the same way, without these restrictions on, the way in which it's valued.
Putting a higher value on femininity, on masculinity over femininity, saying that masculinity is queer because femininity is unqueer, like creating this opposition and this hierarchy and this separation.
And I don't think people have thought about how sexist that is either.
No, it's also, masculinity is better than femininity is traditionally basic sexism, old school.
And I see it working in, I think, how people's contributions to the community are valued and how they're viewed, and the sort of things that are expected of you. Like, I have to try a lot harder and be involved in a lot more things and be a lot more, adamant that for people to take me seriously, I think.
People say about women artists, or like women in the workforce in general, they need to work twice as hard and be twice as good.
Exactly. I mean, that was a sort of like feminism. I'm doing air quotes. Feminism I was brought up with. That I was encouraged to prove that I was as good as a man, but that was kind of how it was phrased, that you can do this as good as a boy. And it was a queer community that you have to be like a superwoman to be valued as a femme or valued as a feminine person. You can be a mess and you're still...
What are you doing in Femme Mafia with, like you say, you're already existing for some years now? And what are the main things you do?
For me, femme community is really important, and especially in sort of not very femme welcoming environment, I think it's really nice to create those spaces for ourselves. So a lot of what we've done has been like social things and meeting for discussions and reading stuff together, or having just like picnics and things like that. But before things like when there's been, protests or other actions, we've kind of networked with each other so that we can be together, so that we feel safer. Yeah, we made a big femme presence at the Transgender Radio last year, and there were more.
The working process with the hierarchies you talked about in the scene?
Yeah, I think so. I feel that maybe it's just because I've been here a bit longer now, and people individually seem to be a bit more welcoming becoming of femininity, and there was a Femme Appreciation Day, which was like an international event, but a non-femme person organised an appreciation in Silver Future. People have been aware of us for a while now, and especially since the Femme Party last year, people are thinking about things a bit more, I think. And I think the Femme Mafia helps to like show that people actually have this identity, that it's not a thing that stops in the 1950s. I think that people really do identify as femme, and that queer femininity exists.
And that femmes are awesome.
And that we're awesome, obviously. I'm really hot.
Yes.
And with the exclusion and hierarchies things, we think there are big differences between the way of acting with femmes and trans femmes?
Yeah, well, I've had like some conversations with other trans femmes here about the troubles they've experienced, and it seems quite to be part of the same sort of problem. But one of the plans we had would be to do a sort of make a kind of solidarity thing between cisgendered femmes and trans femmes. Went to the Femme conference in the US last year, which is really huge. It's like out of all the hundreds and hundreds of femmes, most of them were cisgendered, and I mean there was a small amount of sort of trans femmes of different genders there.
Actually, I think most trans I know are straight transing.
I think there are also feminine trans women, and femmes have stuff in common. I feel like we have similar feelings about our femininity.
Do you want to say anything about your experiences?
I'm in luck that I don't have so much bad experiences. Sometimes I feel included. It's bad at parties and so it works, and in a way there's every time such a distance. I think there is one border the people don't cross coming near. But I think there's a difference.
I mean, do you feel that your contribution to the community is valued in the same way?
That's not really valued. I think with things like, hey, could you do this or do this? It's hard to come in, but back to the beginning where you talked about the scene.
Okay. Yes.
And
I
I want to hear more about that project.
The Zine is, like we said, aim to be a collection of feminine queers, no matter with their gender, as long as they identify as feminine queers.
Yeah, so that's everyone from us, and then feminine fags and feminine transmasculine queers and transfeminine queers, and everybody that.
So it's meant to be a collection of stories and creative writing and art about sexism in the queer community. So people's thoughts not only on what have happened, but also theories about how they'd like things to change, or theories about why sexism against femininity does exist. When I had this idea, I thought, oh, maybe like the Femme Mafia would be interested, but not many other people would be interested in it. That I felt very much alone in this feeling of being excluded and discriminated against because of my femininity. But actually going to the Femme Mafia and having them, and it reached people all over the world, and we actually got like a really massive response, and people saying, yeah, this is a really great project, I'm really glad someone's doing it finally. I felt like this, and I was really pleased with that massive response, and it made me realise that it's not just two femmes in Berlin who are having this problem. It's like,
it's not limited to Berlin.
They're going to have a launch party,
which we're very excited about. It's like the next Femme show.
Yeah.
So you can watch some really good performances and then go and read all about. Completely change your worldview.
What kind of contribution did you get for the theme?
There was quite a range, which is nice. I mean, there were some from, I think, people that are maybe just coming into the femme identity, and then it was kind of talking about, I guess, validation, and the validation they've got from other femmes is sort of a sense of, kind of finally feeling that this is okay, and that it's actually to feel embarrassed that I actually quite like dresses and I quite like dressing up, that it's something that can be celebrated. And experiences of invisibility have come up quite a lot. Well, what it's like to be sort of perceived as a sissy and how one gets treated.
And really awesome two femmes talking about their experiences of exclusion in the queer community and having very intelligent things to say about that.
Femininity and bodies and physicality is very connected in a lot of people's minds, I guess, based on old ideas that feminine people are expected to be, I don't know, maybe small and delicate and hairless, and I don't know, and people kind of negotiate that with their own body, because not very few people are actually like that. So someone wrote a very good piece that she called my androgynous body, I think, where she talks about her relationship with her body and having things like having muscles and having facial hair and things like that, and how she still relates that to her femininity.
I think it's really important to share feelings. I don't really know.
Yeah, and I haven't completely finished writing some of mine, but there are sort of two things that I wanted to address. I guess one of them was because, and Laura has had this experience as well, like so many people that I've had discussions with have kind of said, like at the start of the conversation, like, well, I'm not attracted to femmes, and then they'll say like, oh, well, I support you guys and I think it's great, but I'm not attracted. And it's like,
I like femmes, I just don't want to fuck them.
Yeah, they're just not sexy or something. And I think, you know, I mean, I understand that people have different types and different preferences, and I think people could afford to give that a bit more thought instead of. And also, there are so many different femmes in the world. I find it quite hard to believe that you wouldn't be interested in any of them at all. So that's one. But then also, I guess this is more personal, that I'm interested in talking about how people perceive strength in people and the strength of your personality. And I find that one of the things that gets to me a lot is that I think I'm viewed as not being strong as a femme person. I mean, for instance, I think that the way, if I was upset in public, if I cried in public, I think it would maybe more space and more respect given to someone of a different gender, whereas I think I'd just be seen as a crying girl that had got upset over nothing.
Yeah, I think that the way people perceive my strength as a person doesn't really match up to how I feel, because inside I feel like mostly a really strong woman, like a really strong person, and very capable, and like I know I'm really intelligent and I know I can do all these things. But then the way people treat me is like I'm a silly little girl. I'm just like, what? Where does that come from? I find that completely bizarre, that people would look at me and see like, oh, some silly girl who doesn't know what she's doing, and that's just not true. Same kind of thing as saying, oh, you're upset, you must have your period. Like dismissing your emotions, female emotions, feminine people's emotions.
I'm interested in the trans aspect of all these things and exclusions and so. And persons, maybe trans women, have many experiences with exclusions. And is there a feeling of it? Is the knowledge about it and how to handle with it that it happens?
I can say at least something that actually I'm mostly perceived as some kind of white feminine or something like it, and I'm not really feeling that way, but I can say things like perceived as female, and the difference between being perceived as male before was a change, like being not taken serious so much. If I said the same things I said before some years ago in meetings or something, I'm always a bit insecure and say, maybe it's like this, and feel it's like I said something really important, and if I said, maybe it's like this now, I think it's more perceived like, okay, we can ignore it, she's not really secure about it, things like that. And also with, of course, the room I have in public, like people passing by really closely, and I was sometimes really stressed about that because I was used to having so much space on the street, and now I don't have that.
There is really a lot of sexual harassment in Berlin as well. I experience much more here than anywhere else.
Yeah, especially to feminine people.
Yeah.
I mean, also that's a small reason, but also I'm feeling more comfortable not to be overly feminine because I am totally sexualized then, especially as a trans person. But also in general, I think it's the more feminine you dress, the more harassment you get.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point to mention, because I think people don't take into account how much strength it takes to be a feminine presenting person on the streets in Berlin. It's hard work. You know, I get shouted at the moment I'm out of my door till the moment I go inside. I get called names and harassed and followed, and every single day. Particularly if I wear leopard print. There's like key things. It's like leopard print or red lipstick are two things that just mean gonna get nothing but. I think it's a shame that, you know, people would be put off wearing what they want to wear because of, you know, having to deal with stress all day long because of it. I was in Norway in the past year doing a workshop because they were just going to start a femme group there. One of the femmes there, she used to live in Berlin. She grew up in Berlin, and she was saying, "Oh, I couldn't be femme in Berlin. Like, it's too difficult, and you know, you can't wear things like skirts in Berlin. You don't get any peace at all. You just constant hassle." And I said, "Well, I wear a skirt every day," and she just sort of looked at me like, "You must be stupid." But this is sort of, you know, we all like fight the patriarchy in our own way, and that's one of the ways that I do. That I'm not going to not wear what I want to wear.
Yeah, and I think that walking down the street as a feminine woman is like a fight. It's like, it takes a lot of strength to do that every day and to not compromise about what you wear, and to not have that recognised by the queer community, for them to say that femininity isn't radical when actually it really is, and it really is a fight.
Yes, thank you very much. Hope we hear more about you.
Yeah, it was really fun. Thank you.
Thank you.